Hello everybody, my name is Willie the Van Johnson. I'm here to introduce you to this whole urban spirit martial mix movement. Our basic goal is to educate, empower, and entertain the principles of hip-hop through the principles of martial arts for us. I know you see me dressed right here. The first impression you get, you see me dressed like this, you might say, okay, look at me dressed like a thug. First and foremost, this is one of our clothing lines called Fuya, which is also our name of our magazine, DVD version and paper version. Be on newsstands real soon. It is the voice of the youth. It's the voice of this generation. It's their struggles, their obstacles, and their solutions. And it's an opportunity for us as adults to really hear them out and try to hear what they got to say. You know, and also be able to see visual pictures that represent positive, empowering things that you're trying to do. What I want to do, I want to take some time to talk to you about this whole new curriculum. What I would like to do is, first and foremost, recognize the people that have made this possible for me. I know when I came into the martial arts, the thing that inspired me were the people of the martial artists of the 60s. I guess we call it the blood and gut era. The guys that were like hardcore warriors. I mean, the days of Chuck Norris, Bill Wallace, Joe Louis, Jim Kelly, Ron Van Cleef, Peter Urban, the list goes on and on, man. Steve Saunders, Donnie Williams, Benny the Jet Arquette, Bruce Lee. I mean, you know, I wasn't even born during those days when martial arts was first being introduced here in this country, and especially when the first tournaments were taking place. But I know when I began to do my research, and that was only possible through the karate magazines, I began to be inspired by those stories, those war stories, those lifestyles. I got involved in the martial arts for the simple fact of seeing a movie, Chinese Connection. Grew up in the inner city. Right now it's one of the most violent cities, you know, in the world. Baltimore, they call it murder war. You know, at this time that I'm even talking about this, I think they already have 196 people that have been murdered, and it's just really violent. But when I came up during that era, what I was able to do, at a young age of 6, my parents wouldn't only let me leave the house, but for some reason they allowed me to go to a movie theater and see this Kung Fu movie. And during that time, you always heard about these commercials, you seen the previews, I mean, 5 Fingers of Death, you know, whatever it may be during that time. And I don't know, it was just something about those movies, black exploitation and Kung Fu movies during that time. And I guess, as I got at the age of 6, you know, for some reason that particular day, my parents was convinced it was okay for my neighbor to take me to see this karate movie, Bruce Lee movie, Chinese Connection. I mean, man, that was so exciting, man, because you heard I mean, during that time, everybody was into the martial arts. Everybody was just like, I mean, walk around the streets with nunchucks, made up spears and all that stuff. And this is the inner city. So at 6, I mean, I remember going to that movie theater, it was called the Hippodrome. And walking up, man, it was like in heaven. You couldn't wait, you was just so full of excitement. And you could see a movie line that was from here to probably like 4 or 5 blocks down with nothing but like rows of people. I mean, mommies, daddies, grandparents, everybody waiting to go and see this Chinese hero, Bruce Lee. And I remember finally getting into that theater, man, it was so packed. I mean, so loud. Every time he would hit somebody, you couldn't even hear what was going on the screen because the people were so excited. I mean, even when you go to movies today, it's not like that. I mean, it was incredible. And you just got chills in your body. And for some reason, without even studying martial arts, I remember I didn't see Bruce Lee on the screen. Who I see is me. For some reason, in my mind, I became that person at 6 years old. That movie changed my life. From that point on, after leaving out that movie theater, I remember going back home, cutting up my mom, you know, broomsticks, chopping up the chain and connecting the chain to the little turning part and making my own Bruce Lee sticks, wrapping, you know, electrical tape around and putting all the colors and, man, hit the neighborhood, and every little kid in the neighborhood got a set of nunchucks or got some long stick they out there doing their thing. And everybody out there after the movie emulating and doing what Bruce Lee was doing. And then when you're walking down the street everybody like rocking to some type of music, like a beat, a bop, whatever it may be. So it's like, hold up. It was hip hop, it was martial arts. And then, the more exciting, when you would go to the store or the library, you can pick up Karate Illustrated, Black Belt Magazine, Official Karate Magazine. I mean, they had so many karate books. You can go to the bookstore, and I remember seeing these big, thick color Maso Yama books, man. I mean, we talking full color books. Maso Yama books, breaking watermelons and breaking bricks. I mean, you would be in heaven. That's how powerful martial arts in the 70s. I mean, but and then they were out there on the street. Everything that you was doing was constant about activity. It was either baseball, it was something to keep you inspired. And not even the gadgets that you would take to the side, and you would be doing all these backflips off. You had no instructors. As a matter of fact, karate schools or kung fu schools wasn't even available in those areas. So my inspiration came from the magazines, or came from the movies. So I think it was Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest. Those movies saved so many lives, and people don't even know it. I mean, this is during a time where the suburban America would not even accept the martial art movies. And then, let alone, you talk about the black exploitation. So even when you listen to hip hop and you hear these quotes, or you hear these languages that Snoop Dogg or Dr. Dre and all these guys use, it came from the inspiration of all those things in the 70s. Black exploitation movies, and we're talking about the old school kung fu movies. Those things saved our lives. It was those things and the sports that we were doing in the communities, the community centers, and the creativity to just do whatever you felt, man. That's what brought about hip hop. But at the same time, that's what brought about that expression of martial arts. Think about it. If it wasn't for those elements, there would be no Chuck Lewis or no Joe Louis or no Steve Saunders or no Benny the Jet Arquetas. All those people were a part of those elements. And I was one of those kids that transcended from those examples that those guys set. So it was like, that's what we are just trying to reconnect. For some reason, I guess, through my studies of martial arts and all those elements, I mean, we talking, I guess I didn't get a formal instructor until I was like 10 years old. And by the time I got him and I went to the dojo, I had already knew how to use the weapons and knew how to flip and knew how to fight. Come on, everybody can fight. Even when you see what you see in UFC, come on, you grew up in the hood. To think that a person can grow up in the hood and can't fight is kind of like ridiculous. So fighting is the easiest thing that anybody can do on this planet. I mean, I still think about it. I mean, certain fighters don't have to go to karate dojos to learn how to fight. They just fight. That's what they do on the street. That's what they do in jails. That's what they do everywhere. You know, when I first came into the martial arts, all I did was fight. That's all we did, because that's all the inner city schools did do. Even when I got the formal instructor, all we did was fight. No safety equipment, none of that stuff. But it was just something else I wanted, because I was so exposed to the violence around me, just like you see the youth today. They see it through TV. As a matter of fact, they exposed to more violence today than what it was back then when I was coming up. But I wanted something more. And I guess from when you take the music that I was rocking to, which we didn't call it hip hop, it was just, hey man, it was just music. It was inspired by all those elements, the kung fu movies, the black exploitation, and so forth. And you call it rap today, but it was just a voice of a people who didn't know any other way to express themselves. And when you take all those elements and put them together, to me, the one element that got lost was the martial arts contribution to it. When you think of Chuck Norris, you think of all those guys were in a moment of pure expression, like Bruce Lee. They had to find a way to express themselves. When you really research Bruce Lee, he was trying to get people to respect the struggle of his people. He was a revolutionary. He was doing the same thing that Muhammad Ali was doing. When you think of Chuck Norris, he was like expressing himself from some sort of struggle. Joe Louis, I mean, Bill Wallace, all those guys were trying to express something, and martial arts was their voice. It was their way to send out that message. Bruce Lee was so committed to his that, of course, he was ahead of his time, because not just did he have fighting, but he had philosophy. And I think when you look back in the hood, the reason why those kung fu movies inspire people so much, because it was art, man. It was beyond the norm. I mean, and don't get me wrong, when you see UFC and you see fighting, it's so simple, anybody can do it. But when you look at the old school kung fu movies, you see a guy like flowing and using the weapons and doing it in a rhythmic motion. What's crazy is that the martial arts world say forms and kung fu is not practical. But if you go in the underground market in the inner city, everybody love old school kung fu movies, man. Ain't nobody trying to hurt. That's kind of why it's hard today to even get people to support the martial art movies that come out today. Because people just want that, I mean, that long fight scene. I ain't talking about all the flying and all the weaponry, all the flow, all the style, all the class, which is no different than what you see in the hip-hop element. So when I'm talking about introducing this concept of martial mix, the urban spirit, all I'm just doing is taking what made me the person I am and the martial artist that I am and